Good morning everyone, welcome. Before we begin, this is the first video I make in English, so it's a bit weird for me to talk in English. I also made this same video in Dutch, so if you're interested in that, go watch that one. The game I made is called Atari Breakout. You've probably seen before. You have a pedal underneath, you can move side by side, and a ball bouncing over the screen. And you gotta try to bounce the ball up against the blocks and break them with it. The goal of the game is to break all of the blocks without dying, and if you miss the ball with the pedal, you lose. So that's my version. But before we move on with the explanation of the build, I will first have to explain two important things that make the whole build possible. It's a latch and an AND-Gate. So the latch is a system that gives us the possibility of storing data. We can decide to turn it on and off depending on what signal we send into it, and we can switch its off states when the game is running. This is used for storing the position of the ball and the pedal, for example. AND-Gate is a system which does logic, so when the two signals coming into it are both on, it gives a signal out. This gives us the possibility to perform actions like moving left to right or detecting if the ball is colliding with anything. So now we can move on to explaining the actual build itself. Let's start where I started, which is the pedal. That's the thing you see at the bottom, moving left to right, where the ball bounces on. The pedal is made out of a bunch of latches next to each other, and they represent what pixels of the pedal need to be on or need to be off. For moving the pedal, we first clear all of the latches, and right after that we redirect the signal from before that, one to the right or one to the left, depending on what option you chose. So to put it simply, we clear all the latches and then we redirect the signals from before, one to the right or one to the left. So next we move on to the blocks. The blocks are again just latches. They are either on or they are off. When they detect a signal coming through on one of the lines they are standing on, they turn themselves off. They also send a signal upwards to let the rest of the system know which blocks are turned off and which aren't. And before the block gets turned off, we also check from which direction the ball came. This way we can make sure the ball bounces back in the right direction. So if the ball came from above or below, the ball just needs to flip the y-axis. If it came from the side, it needs to flip the x-axis, and from diagonal sides it needs to flip the x and y-axis. Moving the ball happens with the same system as moving the pedal. So we have a line for the x-axis and a line for the y-axis, and every time it just goes to the left or to the right by one. To represent the ball, you obviously need an x and a y-axis. You get a signal below for the x-axis and from behind for the y-axis. And where those two signals cross, we detect it with AND-Gate, and that's the only place where the signal of the ball goes through. The ball also needs to move in a couple different directions, so it can have a positive y direction, a negative y direction, positive x and negative y, and this also gets determined by latches. The ball also needs to be able to move in three different ways. It needs to be able to move straight up and down, diagonal like about 45 degrees, where it moves one pixel up and a pixel to the side at the same time, and then even more horizontal, in which it moves the x and y at the same time once, and after that only the x-axis. Depending on where the ball hits the pedal, it determines which one of these three movements it needs to pick. So when it lands in the middle, it needs to move straight up and straight down, and it moves the pixel next to it, it needs to move at like 45 degrees, and pixels at the end are the really horizontal one, in which it's one x and then both x and y at the same time. Next on the list are the collisions. Because we built the collision detection into the blocks themselves, we don't have to do that anymore. And now we only have to do the collision detection for the pedal below. So first we see if the ball has a y coordinate of 3, and if one of the x coordinates is equal to one of the x coordinates of the pedal. Then it gets a signal to flip the y-axis and it moves up again. So how we detect which way the ball needs to bounce in is via a bit more difficult system. So we take the pixel of the ball and the 4 pixels next to it. That way we have like a line of 5 pixels, which is the same length as the pedal. Then we check how many of the x coordinates of the pedal align with the x coordinates of the ball, and after that we count how many of those didn't align. Depending on that number, the system will know which way to bounce the ball in. So if it lands completely to the left, all of the pixels of the pedal will align with all of the pixels of the ball, and no pixels would be left. And then it knows to go like the very diagonal to the left. When it lands in the middle, 3 of the pixels of the pedal will align with the pixels of the ball. There will be 2 left, and it knows to go straight up. And this it does with every one of the 5 possible actions, and the system will be able to read out of that which direction it will have to go in. Now the game is actually fully playable and working. Now there's one more problem which I'd like to fix. So not everything on the screen moves at the same time. When you see the ball moving, it first disappears and then reappears somewhere else. Same with the pedal, and not all the pixels of the blocks disappear at the same moment. So I want to add a refresh system. It's basically a bunch of latches and AND gates next to each other. So the latches will keep the data from before, and then when we need the refresh, we clear all of the latches, and with an AND gate we send all of the new signals through. And that way the whole screen refreshes at the exact same time, and it's a lot more pleasant to look at. Last thing is the design of the build itself. It's inspired by like Game Boy type consoles, and if you look at the bottom right you can also see a ball, and at the top left you can see the blocks in 2 colors inspired by the original game. So now everything is done and you can go to the showcase. So welcome now to the showcase. Everything is done, everything is working, and I'll first show you the build itself. I forgot to do this in the Dutch version, so you get a bit more than those people. So it's basically, this is a refresh, those blue are the pixels, the magenta are the blocks and the collision detection needed with it, and the purple is the collision detection of the pedal. And we have yellow for the x-axis of the ball, orange for the y-axis, cyan for combining those two, and all of that comes together in this. Okay, so before we start, I'm gonna have to put the tick speed to 200 because it's way too slow if you put it at normal 20. We have a reset button which just resets the whole system, and we have a clock which refreshes and sends the updates to the system. So you can turn it on, and there are 2 ways to control this. We can push the buttons and it will go and move the pedal, or we can use the pressure plate. So if we go to the left, moves to the left, and to the right, the exact same thing. So this is the end of the video, and then you can enjoy the cinematic showcase starting right now. Wow. So like the video if you liked the video. This sounds stupid. Like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't like it. Let me know in the comments why. It helps me out a lot, and some feedback is always really appreciated. I will not be making every video in English from now on, only like the big important ones will be in English. And there will still be a lot of Dutch videos on this channel, so you can choose if you want to subscribe, because not all of the content will be for you if you can't speak Dutch. Goodbye. If this came from the sides, it needs from the side. It needs. Bye. Oh shit. No.